Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to our masterclass today on the ultimate guide to recovery. We're excited to have you here, and if you're not watching this live, then you will still have access to this masterclass via the app. My name is Ben, and I'm the Academy Manager here at Train Effective's Virtual Academy. We also have here today our guest speaker, Dave Hall. Before we get started, this live session is being recorded. Please make sure your Zoom account title is your first name and surname so the masterclass speaker can address you if and when the session becomes more interactive. If you have any questions for Dave, please use the chat box. And if you experience any technical issues, please let me know through the chat box to assist you. I'm excited to introduce to you today our speaker, who is a sports therapist and university lecturer, Dave Hall.
All right. Hi, guys. Thanks, Ben. And thanks, Train Effective, for having me speak to you guys today. I'll share my screen. Here we go. So Ben's asked me to talk to you guys a little bit about recovery today. Here we go. So in terms of what you guys can do post-game, post-training sessions, and things of that nature, try and make sure you're in top shape and making sure you're competing to your best. All right. Like Ben said, I try to make it as interactive as possible. So if you guys got any questions at any point, hands up, put it in the chat box, however you want to do it. I'm not too fussy. If there's anything particular you guys want to know, then please let me know and I'll direct it that way. Okay. So what we'll do, we'll have a little chat about, I'll introduce myself and what I do, talk about the importance of recovery and why it matters, have a look at a particular framework, sort of pyramid of things you guys should be prioritizing for your recovery. We'll have a little chat about some common mistakes and some strategies you can put in place that might help negate these mistakes. And then obviously at the end, time for any questions you guys have got. All right. So a little bit about myself. These various logos are places I've worked and experiences I've had. So coming out of graduation, working, I've not put it on there, but sort of grassroots sport, and then had the opportunity to work at Watford when they were back in the Prem. And then from there, other football environments, obviously St Albans City Football Club. I was head of medical there originally for the academy and then got progressed onto taking the role for the whole club and sort of helped develop their medical department through there to deal with players in non-league football. More recently, most of my roles have become in basketball. So working with the national teams, the youth age groups, as well as in some of the professional teams as well. Now I'm up in Birmingham, I'm lecturing in sports therapy, but also working alongside the Rockets and trying to do a similar thing to what I did with St Albans in terms of setting up a medical department there. So obviously recovery is a big thing in a lot of these sports. When we look at particularly St Albans and Rockets and some of the semi-pro environments I've been in, what you guys can do away from the field is almost, I'm not going to say as important, well, more important, it'll be as important as what you do on the field. We think you're training for maybe 2-3 hours a day. You've got another 21, 22 hours on what you do in those 21, 22 hours to make yourselves better, make yourself stand out. And then considering some of the strategies we might be able to implement there that don't necessarily cost an arm and a leg. A lot of time when people say recovery, I find they tend to think of like the game readies or crazy supplements or crazy bits of kit. But maybe some of these environments you might not necessarily have access to that. So what can you do instead that's gonna set you up well? Okay. So what can you expect? So we'll look to learn why recovery is important for performance and reducing risk of injuries. We'll talk about some effective recovery strategies, and I'll also give you some practical demonstrations and examples that you can apply almost immediately into your training schedules and your game schedules. All right. I'm not going to use Mentimeter because there's only a couple of you. But just from you guys' perspective, if you guys want to pop in the chat box some stuff that you guys currently do for recovery, I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. And I can't see the chat box. I'm doing share screen. You have to shout out anything that comes up.
Yeah, that's okay, mate. We'll do. To be fair, I've got some questions at the end, so when we do like a little Q&A at the end, I'll throw in some questions.
Okay. Anyone volunteered anything for recovery things they do currently?
Don't be shy, guys. We've got 5 people in it, so what can we think about? Anyone do ice baths? Let us know if you do ice baths. Think about some
Ice
basic ones.
baths,
Um,
protein shakes, stretching, little jog,
foam rolling.
foam rolling, nice.
Might go to the gym. Might go for a little cycle.
What? You say
Don't
you
be
go to the
shy,
gym?
guys. If we make these as interactive as possible, then it's also better for the speaker as well. So.
Yes, all right. All right, we'll move on. Um, that's fine. Yeah, so some of the things we just spoke about, we just shouted out then, are often responses I get when I do these sorts of talks. So, why is recovery important? Like I said to you, it's often that 21, 22 hours away from the pitch or away from the gym. It's a big portion of a day. And why is that so important? Okay. If we take this quote, I quite like it. It's from a PhD working in Australia. She works at the Australian Institute of Sport, and she probably summed up the best way I've heard it, where she said it allows athletes to train their highest possible level and compete to the best of their ability. Okay. It's almost like we have to get out of this mindset of recovery being something we've done to help with the session we've just finished. More if we try to shift that mindset to not only that, but what am I doing that's going to help me be able to compete and train at the highest level for the next session? Yeah. Hopefully, you guys go on to have long, successful careers. Obviously, the higher level you play, the higher demand you want to come on to. I don't know how often you guys are training at the minute, but if we say semi-pro, we're playing maybe 1, 2 games a week, training 2, 3 times a week. And obviously, the higher up that pyramid you get, the more intense that's going to be. Okay, if we're looking at pros, we're probably looking at gym sessions as well as field-based sessions throughout the day, a couple of times a week. So, what does that look like for us, and what are we doing to make sure that we're appropriately fueled and ready to go for that? All right, like we said, academy footballers, you guys face intense physical and mental demands, not only from training and matches, but you've also got other responsibilities as well. Potentially, you've got school, uni, exams, family life, things like that. They're all going to put pressure on you. Recovery is really important to help you guys adapt to these challenges and make sure you can maintain the sort of peak production, peak performance. Obviously, reduce the risk of injury. No one likes being injured. And one of the best abilities in football is availability. Okay, so here's some of the key benefits we're going to talk about. So obviously, we see improved match performance. Okay, so making sure as players you're energized and you're mentally sharp for every game, every training session you're doing, and helping replenish energy stores to allow for that repeated high intensity efforts in football. All right. Maybe goalkeepers excluded. I don't know if the goalkeepers on the call. Everyone else, depending on the style of play, is doing a lot of running up and down the pitch. All right. So making sure you're appropriately ready to repeat those intense periods of exercise. We consider muscular growth and repair. Okay, so you're going to cause lots of little micro tears in muscle tissue. So making sure we recover appropriately, make sure these repairs or these muscles are repaired, and we can improve speed, power, endurance, all those other bits and pieces we want. Injury reduction. Okay, so we know that fatigued muscles and joints, we're more prone to injuries. So your strains, your sprains, and these sort of overuse conditions. So particularly in youth and adolescent athletes, we're seeing things like shin splints, tendinopathies, things like that, where you combine growing as well. So making sure we've got decent recovery routine in place helps to keep the body resilient and reduce the injury risks. Yeah. Sometimes not really thought about, but the mental side of it as well. So football, we know it's not just a physical game. You require a lot of focus, decision making, and mental toughness. So making sure you're able to recharge mentally will help you improve reduction times, your decision making, and your general game awareness. All right. So recovery pyramid. So this is a model. There's a few of these floating around. There's one from a guy called Nick Grantham who worked with Newcastle United and Sunderland. And there's some down from Australia as well, which are nice, but they all sort of share the common themes. All right. At the base of the pyramid, we see things like nutrition, sleep, and stress management, and sort of psychological aspects of it. Okay. On top of that, we see a training plan. So having an appropriate training plan. This might necessarily be wholly on you guys. But if you guys have a gym plan alongside a football plan, it'll be important for you to make sure that you're in communication with your coaches about that. So you're making sure you're not going to fry yourself. Okay. One place I was working at, we had an issue where a player was training constantly with the squad, but then on the side as well, he failed to mention to us that he'd also was training for a marathon as well. So what we thought were going to be recovery days at the weekend turned out to be a long run days, which kind of then tied into why he picked up a lot of little niggly injuries. Okay. When we look at training plan monitoring as well, again, it's probably not something you guys are too aware of, but it's probably something your coaches will do, making sure we're not doing too much, too fast, or too often. Okay. Treatment. So if you're in with a phys, so any soft tissue work, things like that you might have. And then we start looking at recovery modalities. So this might be things like Compex, Normatex, Game Readies, ice baths, things like that. Okay. Now, what's important for us to note, and I've highlighted them in blue, the two things we'll probably have the most control over. And for us, or for you guys, the most important thing is going to be this base of the pyramid. Okay, so getting your nutrition, getting your sleep, and getting your psychological stresses sorted out. Okay, if we don't get this base and this foundation appropriately managed, all this stuff on top almost becomes irrelevant. Okay, you can have the best training plan in the world, but if you're not eating, sleeping, you find yourself constantly mentally frazzled, that training plan is not going to be as beneficial. Same for monitoring and same for treatments. All right. These recovery modalities peak at the top. They're nice, almost like a nice to have. But they really have their biggest benefit when you get everything else underneath it sorted out. Okay, so for the purpose of today, we're going to spend most of our time talking about this bottom foundational period. Okay. If I'm lucky enough to come back to talk to you guys again, we might go into some of the other bits and pieces. But just for today, we'll talk a little bit about nutrition, sleep, and stress, and how we might manage some of these bits and pieces. All right. So we say, looking at nutrition. So we said already, football is a high intensity sport. Okay. Obviously, there's an endurance component to it as well. Matches are 90 plus minutes long, and this will end up depleting the body of its glycogen stores and also dehydrates the body. So we can talk about hydration today as well and why that's important. Okay. Sleep. So sleep's really important to the body. It helps support muscle repair, helps us mentally focus and restore some of our energy supplies. And obviously our stress side of it. So the more mentally resilient we can become, the greater capacity we'll have to recover. So if we look at nutrition first of all, okay, the big three for us, all right, we look at things like proteins. So proteins are obviously our building blocks. We're looking at muscle growth and things of that nature. All right. Now, when we look at the dosages, if we look at the literature, I'm not going to bore you guys by quoting millions of studies, we can see that post-training and post-games, we want to get about 0.3 grams per kilogram as soon as possible post-training. All right, so whether this comes in the form of, a protein bar, protein shake, things like that, get one of those down as quick as possible, start that recovery process as quick as possible. Okay. Generally throughout the day, again, we probably want to see about 0.3 grams per kilogram per meal across 4 to 5 meals in a day. Okay, so breakfast, lunch, dinner, maybe a couple of snacks in there as well. In terms of if we're looking pre-game, pre-training, things like that to make sure we're appropriately fueled. Okay, in terms of best sources for it, as in sources not like barbecue, as in sources of protein, any sort of leucine-rich complete proteins, which we commonly find in whey and milk. I'm not sure there's any vegetarians on the call, but things like the vegetarian or vegan alternatives for whey protein now are also pretty high up in there and pretty good. All right. So that old analogy of using things like chocolate milk is actually really great for a recovery drink. All right. And our meals across the day, we want to make sure we're looking at complete protein. So your lean meats, chickens, poultries, fish, eggs, milk, yogurt, soy, tofu, quinoa is another one that's really good. It's a high protein or dense protein source. All right. And obviously this is going to help support any protein synthesis as well as it's going to help support muscle repair and muscle remodeling. Okay. Now, moving to carbohydrates. Again, within the first hour post-training, probably within a little bit sooner than that, half hour if we can, we want to look at things like 1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight in that first time. And then throughout the day, we want to see about 5 to 7 grams per kilogram per day. Okay. And again, this is probably going to come alongside your protein in your meals in around there. Okay. Post-training, post-game, ideally we want to start seeing as quickly digested and quickly absorb protein. So things like sports drinks, like your Lucozades, Gatorades, things like that. Other drinks are available. Any sort of recovery bars, shakes, white bread's pretty good as well. Peanut butter on toast, things like that would be great. And then through the day, we want to be looking at sort of these whole grains, so it's unprocessed stuff. So whole grains, potatoes, sweet potatoes, your browns or your wild rice, any fruit and veg, and then dairy products as well. Okay. Looking at replenishing, well, our main aim is to replenish glycogen and support immune function. Okay. It's also been shown to help reduce the risk of overtraining. Okay. Okay. And then fluid. All right. This is the one that often gets overlooked. And it's one of those where people don't really think about it until they're thirsty. But by the time you're thirsty, you're probably already dehydrated. Our general guidelines, again, it would be slightly different, but we're probably looking between 1 to 1.5 liters of fluid for each 1 kilogram of body mass lost. So a really easy way to see how much fluid you've lost due to training or due to gameplay is if you weigh yourself before the game or training and weigh yourself after the game. That weight loss is probably going to be water related. Okay, so you know roughly how much you got to be putting back into your body. Okay, obviously, if you go to the bathroom during that time as well, make a note of that. And if you're drinking water throughout, make a note of that. Okay, but if I know that before the game I weighed 100 kilos, I'm picking 100 just so the maths is easy. After the game, I weighed 98 kilos, but I've also had a liter of water in there. Then I know I've lost around 3 kilos of body mass. Okay, that's obviously massively exaggerated, but there it is. Okay. Now, our best sources of this, some sort of chilled fluid. And ideally, we don't necessarily want just water by itself. So some sort of supplement like electrolytes or things in there. And I've thrown in the sort of the dilution rates you should have, or ideally should have. But I wouldn't necessarily expect you guys to be on top of that. Okay. But if things like electrolytes and things like that would be really important. Okay. To restore those sorts of bits and pieces that are required. Okay. Like we said, is to restore the body fluence balance and the plasma volume. Okay, any questions about nutrition? I'm going to go from the silence that it's a no.
Actually, may I ask?
I didn't quite hear.
May I ask a question?
Kushka.
Yeah, so when it comes to nutrition, in general, let me just say, I know, it's different in in season, but I am in off season right now, and I just want to ask, so what kind of percentages, so based on all the calories we eat, how many do we want to those be of carbohydrates, protein, or fats, when it comes to percentages, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's a good question. Everyone will be slightly different. And like you say, throughout the season, it'll vary your energy demands in the off season, depending on where you are. Are you in pre-season training or is it just off season?
Off season, my season ended maybe a month or maybe even longer ago.
Okay, so you're in that sort of recovery downtime. I mean, this would be a good advantage. I wouldn't be overly concerned at this point about how much or what you're eating. Try and eat as healthy and clean as possible. Percentage wise, it won't change too much. So if you look at the traditional food plates and things like that, where you've got X amount of carbs, X amounts of proteins, X amounts of colorful veg and things like that, that'll set you up in the right sort of direction. The split of it won't change too much as you go through. But in terms of quantity, you might find you're eating a little bit less in the off season. That's all. Okay. If you've got a nutritionist at the club, they'll probably give you more in detailed breakdown of bits and pieces. But as a starting point for guidance, that's where I'd start. To answer your question, Geordie.
A little bit, but like I kind of meant like, for example, like I kind of know already like how many calories I want to eat right now, but like I was like trying to like look at like protein, and I'm thinking or like into all of those, like because right now I want to like, well, for a long time, like, I wanted to like kind of use this time to like lose fat and build muscle at the same time. So I'm thinking like, to do that, do I have to like eat like as much like like a gram of protein for every pound of body weight, or do I have to eat more, or like how exactly like do I do that compared to like when I compare it to like all the food I eat, or if what I'm asking is making sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's a little bit outside of my scope of practice in terms of actual nutritional advice I can give out to you outside the generals. You probably need to speak to more of like a nutritionist on those fronts. All right. But in terms of, yeah, if you speak to a club nutrition or something like that, that would be my go-to. Sorry, I can't really help on that one. Okay. Anyone else? Cool. All right. So our second pillar at that bottom, at that foundation of our pyramid is sleep. Sleep, something that doesn't get thought of enough as a recovery modality. It's something that hopefully everyone has access to. It doesn't necessarily cost you anything. Interesting thing when we look at sleep is a lot of research has been done on athletic populations now, and comparing it to like regular everyday folk. So we've seen that if we compare athletes to general population, we can see that. Oh, hang on, sorry, my connection's on. There you go, I'm back. Okay. Um, Athletes typically might get a similar amount of sleep as general population, so usually between 7 and 8 hours, but the quality of the sleep in athletes will be lower. Okay, so sleep latency, so how long it takes you to get to sleep, how long time awake during your, how much time you are awake during your sleep, and how efficient your sleep is. These results are all a little bit lower compared to general population, right? And there's a number of reasons for that. Okay, so if we think of the life as a footballer, um, nighttime matches, late kickoffs, if you've got television networks, things like that, congested scheduling, so travel, things like that. We're just talking about Ben now. Western Auburn City, their last game of the season is away at Truro, which is obviously a massive amount of travel. So an early start, how much of an impact that'll have. And then the other bits and pieces. So we're looking at any sort of self-imposed limitations to sleep, and we'll talk about those shortly, but poor sleep hygiene. So sleep hygiene is something you guys can all take control of in terms of your own sleep routines and your own sleep environment. Okay. Talk about this one. There's a lot of, again, more research done in the States. Weirdly, footballers don't tend to feature too much in sleep research. But over in Stanford in the States, they've done some research on collegiate athletes, and they found if they had at least 8 to 10 hours of sleep, then they found that the sprint times, shot accuracy, reaction times, endurance, and recovery, sort of subjective how they felt, were all better than those that didn't. Similar to, they did some studies on swimmers as well. And again, we saw similar sort of results in swimmers in terms of reaction time, speed in the water, and things like that. It was better in those that had between 8 to 10 hours sleep. So it's pretty powerful, pretty unthought of. So we have a little chat about how sleep might affect things you do. All right. So there's three main things when we think of sleep. We'll think of sleep duration, quality, and something else I can't think of. So we really want to be seeing at least 7 hours per night of sleep. But as players, you should be aiming between 8 to 10 hours. Okay. In terms of total sleep, nighttime sleep should be your priority. Okay. I know we all like a nap during the day, but as we'll see in a bit, napping can sometimes take away from that actual sleep quality. So we want to make sure we're prioritizing a good night's sleep. Okay, if we're below this sort of 8 to 10 hour threshold, then we probably want to start trying to increase our sleep by 30 minutes per night per week. Okay, trying to suddenly throw in a lot of sleep all at once won't necessarily give you the best results, but just trying to gradually increase it 30 minutes per night per week until you're between that threshold. Okay, everyone will be slightly different. Some might be okay with 8, some might be okay with 10, okay, or anywhere in between. But trying to gradually increase it on that time is important. All right. Now, sleep quality. This is where we start thinking about our sleep routine and what that looks like. Okay, we should have a dedicated winding down time, which will include a power down our tech time. Okay, so things like TVs, phones, tablets, they're all quite high in blue light. And blue light, we know, tends to affect our sleep through suppression of various neurotransmitters. So trying to power that down a decent amount of time before we try and go to sleep will improve our quality of sleep. All right. In terms of our sleep environment, this is pretty caveman. We're not too evolved. Generally, our body's like a cool, dark, and quiet environment. So a bit like a cave that our long lost ancestors probably would have slept in. Okay. Goes without saying, but avoiding caffeine before we sleep is important. Okay. And you should think in this as well. If we've got nighttime games, we're having pre-workout and things like that, obviously it's quite high in caffeine. Is that going to have an impact on our sleep? Okay. Alcohol at night. Now, I don't know what the age of you guys are on the call. So I don't know how much experience you would have had in this. Sometimes with alcohol, things like that, you'll feel like you get to sleep quicker. But again, it will be that quality of sleep you have. So just due to reactions in the brain, things like that, the quality of sleep you have at night will be worse. Okay, not to mention the dehydration, things alongside with that. Okay, and avoiding high processed fats and sugars as well. Obviously, we're trying to wind down, so those sorts of things are going to try to, or they will slow down our. All right, and our sleep timing. Okay, ideally, perfect world, we want to try and keep our waking up time consistent throughout the week. All right, I know it can be tempting if we've got a late tip or late training, to try and have a little bit of a lay-in. But if we can try and keep as consistent as we can, then obviously our body gets in that rhythm. Okay? Exposure to outdoor morning light, especially in the winter, is important. Okay, the way the body works is we get that sunlight coming in the mornings, it starts waking up our systems a little bit better. Right? Depending on what sort of person we have in terms of our circadian rhythms and things like that, is a fancy way of saying chronotype. Naps, we want to try and keep them between 1 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, nothing later than that, because otherwise it can start impacting our sleep. Okay. And again, similar to when we were talking about keeping our waking time consistent, we also want to try and keep our going to bed times similar. Okay, obviously things will impact that, like we said, late kickoffs, things like that. But if we can try and keep that as consistent as possible, that would be important. All right. So if we look at the environment, break it down a little bit more. So sometimes if we've got a lot of street light or noise outside, or if we're traveling on coaches, things like that, or flights, I don't know how much international sport you guys play, but flights can be a nightmare for it as well. If we're struggling with keeping a dark environment, we can use things like face masks or eye masks, sorry. Okay, if we've not got enough blocking out with curtains, things like that. Try and set our room between 16 and 21 degrees Celsius. Okay, so nice and cool. 18, I think, is the peak. And in terms of noise control, if we don't like sleeping in silence, think about white noise. So there's plenty of white noise apps you can get on phones now, which kind of give that sound machine type effect. Or if we want the silence, we can earplugs, or that fan can also provide some white noise. Okay. In terms of our routine, okay, it should last between 20, 30 minutes before you want to go to bed. Like I said before, try and avoid screens that emit blue light, or use a filter to block this out. So things like blue light glasses you can buy on Amazon now, super cheap. They'll help block some of that light out. Okay. Things like reading from a real book, not necessarily a Kindle or a screen, can be good to help switch off. And then stretching or yoga or things like that are also good options to help wind down. Little shout out to napping. Okay, so typically people tend to nap in the afternoon the most, and that's probably due to a dip in your circadian alertness. Two ideal nap durations, you've got less than 20 minutes, and that's because circadian rhythms and those cycles through REM sleep tend to last around 20 minutes. If you find yourself waking up and you're super tired, it's probably because you've been woken up in the middle of one of those REM cycles, okay? Or 90 minutes. There are two ideal napping times. All right. Now, onto our third pillar of this foundation, we're looking at stress and recovery. So psychological recovery involves resting and resetting the mind after you train or matches. Okay. It will help you manage mental fatigue. So whether that's professional performance or school or other commitments you've got, and obviously stress, competition, expectations, setbacks, things like that. Okay. So in academy football players, sorry, it will help reduce burnout. So, balancing intense training schedules with those external pressures as well. So school, family, things like that, agents, contracts, media, as you get older and go through the process, it all have a big impact. All right. Improving mental sharpness. Okay, so we know how important mental sharpness and decision making is to games. If we're super stressed and haven't recovered mentally, this is obviously going to be blunted a little. All right. Helping with consistency. So if you're super stressed, it can help, or it will lead to, increased physical fatigue, or increased perception of fatigue. So if you're super stressed and wound up, you're probably going to find exercise and training that normally you'd be okay with would be a lot more intense, or seem a lot more intense, a lot more difficult. All right. We'll also then see an increased injury risk and obviously a decrease in performance. Okay. And then tying into what we looked at a second ago, helping with this mental recovery, it'll also help enhance your sleep quality. Okay. So a calm mind, we said, help promotes restful and deep sleep. Okay. So some strategies we might employ when we're looking at stress and recovery, mindfulness and meditation. I don't know how many of you guys partake in some of this. So just, 5 to 10 minutes of just mindfulness or guided meditation. There's a lot of good apps out now there, like Headspace and things like that. Will just take you through a quick cycle of meditation. Amazon Music. Hang on, I've got a shout on a message. How do you meditate before matches? Nice. Yep. So it'll help get you in the zone or calm that mind down. How do you find it, Matt? Do you find it pretty easy to do? Just give us a thumbs up if yes. Or simple breathing exercises. So a lot of time when I'm away with international teams now, a lot of our cool down will be around what's called box breathing. Just taking 2 or 3 minutes to just go through nasal breathing exercises. So breathing in for 7 seconds, breathing out for 11 seconds. But if you do it in and out through your nose, it will help just calm things down a little bit. Okay, it affects nice match. Yeah, so relaxing music, I think are good moments in football. Yeah, so that positive mental imagery, things like that, super important. What was it? Yeah, so breathing exercises, it just helps calm down you guys have all heard of fight and flight mechanisms. So when you're playing football and you're running, you're breathing in and out through your mouth a lot of the time, not only because it helps you get more oxygen, but also because the knock-on effect of that, it will fire up that part of the nervous system that stimulates that fight or flight. The nasal breathing counters that, so it helps calm everything back down. Okay. So I've got the same thing written down twice here. Sorry, guys. That's a lot of time to relaxation activities, and journaling. So I don't know if any of you guys partake in journaling, but writing things about the game or training, what went well, what you can improve, just get anything that's stressing your mind out and get it out on the paper. Okay. And also connecting with support networks. Okay, so spend time with teammates, family, friends, just talk and decompress. All right. You probably find that they'll probably have a perspective you might not have thought of. But if you're going through a tough moment in the game, you're really focused on one thing, you might not necessarily focus on all the other things you've done well. All right. So that can really help with that stress. All right. So looking at some of the common mistakes I've seen when I'm working with athletes. So skipping the basics is a big one. So overlooking these foundational recovery principles, so your sleep, your nutrition, and your stress stuff. Okay, so without sleep, like we said, without sleep or proper fueling, these advanced methods have minimal effect. Okay, so really to fix that, we want to try and prioritize these bottom layers. Delaying nutrition, so waiting too long to eat or drink after football, obviously helps or causes a delay in the glycogen replenishment and muscle repair. Okay, so eating a carby protein snacks like chocolate milk, fruit, protein shake within 30 minutes is a quick fix to this. All right. Obviously, this might take a little bit of organization, depending on where you're playing, depends on if you're going to have food after the game or things like that. If you're on media duties, if you've got to go and do that first. So if you've got, let's just say, chocolate milk pitch side for when the final whistle goes, leave it with the fizz, just get him to give it as you're walking off the pitch. You can be sipping that down. Okay. Neglecting mental recovery is another thing I see quite often. So if we only focus on the physical recovery and ignoring the important part of relaxing the mind, we know the impact that mental fatigue has, all right? Sleep quality, confidence, decision making all go in the toilet. So using mindfulness approaches, so like Maj spoke about is meditation he does. You see Daniel as well has an hour routine before matches. Be interested to know if you guys do stuff after matches as well, to see if that helps unwind. All right. Lack of hydration is another one. It's really easily overlooked. Part of the nice thing about if you using the chocolate milk trick, you get some hydration from the milk as well. But obviously, dehydration leads to fatigue, cramping, and slower recovery. Okay. So using water or electrolyte drinks to replace lost fluids and monitoring hydration. Okay. It doesn't even have to be as complicated as what we spoke about before in terms of weighing yourself pre and post activity. You can use things like the urine color charts. Okay, there's plenty of those out there. Basically, the darker the urine is, the more dehydrated you are. But similarly, the lighter urine is, it gets to a point where you're too hydrated, which should also have an impact on recovery. All right. Doing too much too soon. Okay, we see this a lot in youth footballers in particular. If you've got academy training, but you've also got school games, or you've got kicking around with your mates, things like that, or you're playing for multiple teams. Okay, not giving yourself the best opportunity to recover. Right. Tournament football will be another example. I don't know how much tournament football you guys play, but if you've got a game every few days, you want to make sure you're doing as much as you can between those points. All right. And then obviously the last one, focusing on quick fixes. So using ice baths, massage tools, compression gear, but without looking at nutrition, sleep, and mobility is obviously a frowny face for us. Good man, Daniel. That's why we're all here, mate. Okay. So we say quick fixes might feel good, but it don't necessarily address your underlying recovery needs. So treat these quick fixes, ice baths, etc., as supplementary, but not as a replacement for your foundational practices. All right. So something we use to great effect with the national teams I've worked with is like a recovery point system. I don't know if you guys have seen these before. There's also quite a famous one that goes around Twitter, X, Instagram every now and then. Arsenal's 150 point recovery point system. This is the one we use. It's a little bit more manageable and puts a little bit more emphasis on that bottom foundation we spoke about. Okay, so essentially you want to get a certain number of points each day. Okay, depending on what sport it is, it will depend on what or how many how many points you want from each category, I should say. So we try to aim for about 15 points. Okay. So if you sleep for 8 or more hours or 8 to 10 hours per night, you get 3 points. If you have a little nap during the day, you get another 2 points. If you use sleep aids, so eye mask or earplugs, you get another point. Okay, so essentially you can clear up 6 points of your 15 with one little thing there, okay? I'll note we use this this system in tournament play. So we've got a game every couple of days. So it's important for these guys to get this right. Okay. Nutrition, we're putting a big emphasis on whole foods. So we're making sure we've got a nice, colourful plate within 90 minutes of activities. We can have, within 30 minutes of finishing practice, we can have a simple sugar or carb-based drink. If we meet our daily hydration targets, we're buzzing. Okay. On this note as well, I'd say if we can, there's a lot of talk about sort of anti-inflammatory foods and things of that nature. Don't necessarily need to be pummeling loads and loads of supplements. I don't know how many of you guys are using supplements. But if we can get a nice, colourful plate of food, typically we'll hit most of those sort of things we want in around them. Okay. A psychological practice, nice and easy. Like I said, guided meditation, something as simple as listening to a chill out playlist or practicing our 7-11 breathing protocol, all 3 points. Massage, we put quite a big emphasis on players looking after their own massage needs. So things like foam rolling, super easy. We tend to encourage players to foam roll before and after every session. Just 30 to 60 seconds each part. Massage gun as well. I don't know if you guys use massage guns. And then a 15-minute deep tissue massage. Obviously got your point as well. Looking at mobility, so a bit more active recovery. So yoga, Pilates, stretching aids, or static stretching. We put a bigger emphasis on the active stuff. Compression wear, and then obviously hydrotherapy, we include in them as well. So things like stretching or a little hydrotherapy session, 20 minutes, 3 points. Using things like icing with 2 points, and then contrast showers we threw in there as well. Okay. All right. Over to you guys. Any questions?
Excuse me, may I go in?
Yeah, shout out, Jordy. Let me turn you up a bit.
Yeah, so I just wanted to ask, I heard this the other day. I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard someone say something like we sleep in 90-minute cycles, therefore you want to either get 7.5 hours of sleep or 9 hours. Is that like true, or do you know anything about that, or um, like if what I'm asking is making sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so we sleep in cycles, and they'll go through. Typically around 7 hours is what you want for an average person. But when we're looking at athletic population, the research out there suggests that the 8 to 10 hour window is our best shot in terms of performance.
Okay,
So
that
that
makes
90,
sense. Sorry?
I say that 90-minute thing you're talking about kind of ties into what we're talking about naps, where you either want less than 20 minutes or you want 90 minutes, because that will tie into a full rhythm or a full cycle.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Another thing I wanted to ask is like, in the past I've had like poor sleep habits, whether it be in season or off season, and maybe it will be even easier for me to have them now since I'm in the off season and it's the holidays as well. So I just wanted to ask like, do you have any advice or like how you can like stay motivated to like make them healthier, if what I'm asking is making sense?
When you say make them healthier, what do you mean?
Like my sleep habits, like, like have better ones, like, because I now realize like, and honestly, I think it's taken me too long to realize like for like reasons in the past, like whether it be for like university or like, busyness or simply priorities, like, I don't think I've gotten enough sleep and I want to start to get more. So like I want to ask like how do you do that? Or like, or like how would you build towards that, if what I'm asking is making sense?
Yeah. So typically what I'll do is if I'm working with an athlete when I'm away with them and they're struggling with sleep or they haven't got the best sleep hygiene, should we say, I try and go for small wins where I can. So rather than trying to change everything at once, I often found with athletes it doesn't necessarily work because it's nice. super weird, suddenly changing everything, and you can't sleep because you've changed everything. So trying to do little things all at once. So whether that's a case of, I'll adjust the thermostat, for example. Okay, right, we've got a cooler environment. Okay, that's one thing done. All right, have I got the TV playing in the background? Okay, let's get rid of that. Let's pop on some white noise or something instead. Okay, that's two things done. Okay, eye mask. Is it dark enough? If it's dark enough, fine. If it's not, can I put an eye mask on or something of those nature? Change the curtains, whatever it might be. Okay, now I'm in the right environment. Then it comes down to looking at my routine. So what am I doing before I go to bed? Am I just, doom scrolling through Instagram and then trying to go to sleep straight away? It's not necessarily the best pattern for me. Everyone will be slightly different. But typically if we can get that pre-bed routine sorted, so at 20, 30 minutes warming up to there, okay, phone goes away for 20, 30 minutes. I'll do, you know, 10 minutes of guided meditation, and I'll do 10 minutes of just light, easy yoga, 10 minutes of breathing exercises. Okay, and I now get to sleep. All right. So I wouldn't try and change everything all at once. I'd probably look to try and change a couple of things over a period of time. And if it's duration we're looking at rather than quality, like we said, not trying to just suddenly say, right, I'm going to sleep for 10 hours tonight. If I'm only sleeping 6 hours, try and increase it by 30 minutes each night until I get each week to get to that point. Does that make sense?
Yes, I believe so. Thanks for that. Yeah, I noticed. I think someone else has a question. I just asked because I kind of wanted to ask something else, but I want to make sure you can get to other people's questions too.
Fine, I've got time, I've got nowhere to be.
Yeah, should I
Yeah,
just ask my next thing
yeah,
then?
sure. Yep.
Yeah. Um, I would say would you advise to because I noticed even more so yesterday, yesterday would be a good example. I ended up waking up a bit earlier due to factors such as other people in my house. And I also noticed I don't think I have curtains in my bedroom as well, but um it was the sun was out already and I kind of wanted to sleep more, but the problem was even though the lights in my bedroom were off, it was still quite bright in there. I don't think I would have even needed them, so to speak, because it was quite bright outside. So I would say, would you look to try and like base the time you go to sleep around the time the sun rises, if what I'm asking makes sense?
It makes sense. Not necessarily. Like if you've got a set routine, you need to wake up at this time, that time, wherever it might be, but you find the lights getting in your room before then, that's when I probably start looking at either A, trying to get some blackout curtains or blackout blinds, or if I'm not in a situation I can do that, something as simple as an eye mask. You can get some pretty decent eye masks online now that are pretty comfortable to sleep in, just to black it out. And if I've got housemates or whoever it might be, or flatmates or whoever might be moving around, that's when I'd look to include earpads or white earpads, ear earplugs or um, white noise.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I know. Like I like to ask a lot of questions. I noticed that there's some things in the chat. I don't know if you want to get to those first or if
Yes, have a look. So Maj, cold baths even in winter. You're a brave man, Maj. So ice, yeah, ice baths I'm not against, but again, like we said at the beginning, um, you're better off trying to get the other bits sorted first, and then potentially looking at your cold baths afterwards. All right. I mean, icing could be a whole nother 2 hour seminar on that. Because you can, in theory, your icing should be targeted to what you're trying to achieve from your training as well. But that would be a whole nother session. So cold baths aren't necessarily the worst thing in the world, but they're not going to have as big an impact as if you hit your foundations first. So your sleep, your nutrition, your stress, and an appropriate periodized plan. Is it good to train at 4 or 5 a.m.? If you are swimmers, they don't really have a choice, as long as it's not at the detriment to your sleep. Okay, so if you're getting up to train 4 or 5 a.m., you've got to try and work it out in your head. You might have a few early nights. All right. Daniel, are things you've touched on the most important aspects of recovery? They're important compared to when we're looking at the higher up levels of the pyramid. They're easy wins for you. You don't require a lot of tools or equipment, to get a good night's sleep, to eat healthy food, and then, try and manage your stress through whatever it might be. So they're probably gonna have the biggest impact. And then the other bits and pieces on top of that, as well as a well-organized plan. All right. I'm not sure in terms of coaching and things like how much impact you guys have on your planning. But hopefully you're in a situation where coaches are considering things to make sure you're not burning out by doing too much. All right. Most coaches will have some sort of plan, like what they're doing on match day +1, match day +2, match day +3, things like that. Hope that answers your question, Daniel. Okay. Anybody else?
That's perfect. I think just one from me, just because I'm trying to think what the boys will be asking when they're watching this back. If you could kind of only introduce one recovery method, you can only pick one out of all that you've mentioned, what would
Yep.
that be? Why?
Oh man. And I'm not just cheating at the whole bottom level. uh,
Yeah.
I mean, all three of those things are pretty important. I think they all kind of tie into each other. Like if you're super psychologically stressed, it's going to mess with your sleep. And if it messes with your sleep, potentially you're going to see effects on the appetite and things of that nature. Um, for me, just from a personal perspective, I feel like a lot of it just starts with sleep. Um, I think if I can get my sleep right, if the athletes get their sleep right, it makes a big difference. But then I guess it all kind of comes under the banner of, I don't want to sound like I'm nagging, but like organization, where like if you set yourself up so you know when you're going to sleep, you're disciplined in when you're going to sleep, you know what time you've got available to then make sure you've got the right nutrition in place. Um, and also you've got time for your psychological stuff as well. I mean, that's a tough question, man. I wouldn't just pick one of them.
Yeah,
Gun to
yeah,
my
no, of
head.
course. To be fair, like I was just trying to think what some of the boys might be asking. And just one other one, the perfect answer by the way, just one other one. Could you think of like an example of like a player you might have been performer you might have worked with, and how you've noticed the transition from them poor recovery levels to good recovery levels, and how and what they implemented and how that impacted them?
Yeah, I mean, football example or any sport?
Any sport, and just like a sporting performer, to be fair.
Okay. So let me think. European Championships last year with basketball. Um, we had players, a player in particular, they came in with real bad patella tendinopathy type issues. Um, they've been playing out in the States. College sports a whole different realm. If anyone's played out, it's crazy. She's playing D1 basketball. Real bad knees, but then when we sat down and looked at her, we found she wasn't sleeping. She's maybe 3, 4 hours a night. She was on Instagram, Twitter, whatever it might be, until 2, 3 a.m. in the morning. Diet was rubbish. So eating candy after practice, eating candy for a day, crisps, all this sort of other bits and pieces. Um, and was just mad stressed with herself all the time with any sort of negative performance she had. She'd beat herself up for a few hours. So for her, one of the big issue or the big projects we had was a lot of education in terms of, okay, right, getting your pre-bed routine sorted. Okay, so that would be, um, so like Geordie used the example earlier on, the room was too light. We traveled a lot around Europe, staying in hotels didn't necessarily always have blackout curtains. In the summer, it got light pretty early. So, making sure she had a sleep mask and white noise playing in the background, and then sorting out, making sure this is what you should be eating and drinking before and after practice, trying to get away with these high inflammatory foods, your sugars and things like that. And we found it made her symptoms, her pain improved a lot. That probably made the biggest impact on her symptoms than anything else. Because we're with them such a short period of time. There's only so much from a medical, like physical perspective we can do in terms of rehab and whatnot. And so changing those other bits and pieces, so those other 22 hours a day, but we were on double days, so over 20 hours a day, probably made a massive impact on them.
Yeah, perfect. If any of you guys only have got any more questions, we've got probably around. We need to see we've got the knowledge here. So any questions you want answered, fire them in the chat. Got about 60 seconds left, and then we'll call it there.
May I go one last time?
Okay.
So another thing I wanted to ask about is like, yeah, I know I keep mentioning like the science of like sleep and whatnot, but like I don't think like you ever talked about like the beta, like or delta, like wavelengths that like I think your brain produces, like depending on whether you're asleep, awake, or like just waking up. Like, have you heard of those or before anything?
In terms of in what
Like your
in
brain, like the ones like the waves it produces.
yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily a sleep expert in terms of alpha waves,
Okay.
beta waves, delta waves. From my perspective, it's more about how we're going to apply this into um, like practical things we can do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't say I'm an expert on those different brain waves and whatnot. I'm more about how I can take sort of current best practices and research out there in terms of athletes and sleep and performance, and then how we can sort of manipulate that. So I mean, I can probably point you
Yes.
to if you look at a lot of the research if you're interested in it, if you look at a researcher named Dr. Sherry Ma, I'll put her name in the chat. Um, she does a lot of work with collegiate athletes and sleep and performance. So she's probably written a bit about different brain waves and things in there.
Yeah, I was just
Perfect.
going to ask. Okay, sorry.
Is that all good? Anything else, Jordy? Good man for asking questions. I like that we're asking the questions. Anything else?
Well, I mean, I was just gonna like my point was like, it was gonna lead to I've heard people give the advice of like to don't go on your phone like immediately after you wake up for like that reason because I think you skip like one phase of like, the delta or beta waves. But like the issue with me is like usually I have an alarm on my phone, so I kind of have to like look at it for a second to like turn it off, and then I feel like that almost makes it easier for me to like grab it and not really delay my screen time. And I just wanted to ask like if you have like any advice on like how to like I guess cheat myself around that or how do I or like if any advice or like when that's kind of my situation if when I'm asking and making sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's pretty common. I mean, everyone tends to have their phone on alarm or an alarm on their phone nowadays. Outside of you getting a dedicated alarm clock, that's that going to work for you. Um, that would be my advice if you're worried about that.
All right, thank you.
Perfect. Absolutely love it. So, Dave, really appreciate you taking your time out to share some of your knowledge. Really, really insightful. We're going to call it there for today, guys. Um, if you do have any questions and you're watching this back, feel free to put it in the WhatsApp group chat. I might even add Dave in there so we can add in some more knowledge. But we're going to call it there for today. Dave, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it, and we'll catch up soon.
Appreciate you having me on.
That's all right. See you later. Bye bye all.
See you later, guys.